seat in Romania, we could actually be some sort of a bastion of the left. We can become one.
Yeah.
That's the actual truth.
Yeah, locally here, things
Locally
will get
here,
worse.
like we want to maintain the democratic civilization. In the memory of Joe Biden and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There are actually people that in the mainstream press they can recover from the shock that the landslide re-election of Trump created for them. They still criticize him. They still don't understand what's happening in Europe. They say, okay, Trump is crippling Europe. No, Europe by its bureaucrats crippled itself.
Hai, davai, 3, 2, Adin. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. And for some ungodly reason, you still have the boredom to watch these kinds of things. I'm in Iași County, and I'm with Silvian for the first time on the English channel. Those of you who follow the Romanian language channel are probably very much familiar with what we're going to talk about. But nevertheless, I thought about introducing Silvian to our foreign audience. Silvian, welcome on the original OG Freedom Alternative channel.
I'm very glad to have you here. And also, being the first time and your channel in English.
Yeah, it's soon enough it's going to turn 10 years old, this channel. It's quite amazing how many big YouTubers used to be a thing in 2015 and they're already forgotten by now.
So
but the sofa still lives on.
10 years is still something.
Yeah, right. So I guess briefly introduce yourself and your activity for those who definitely do not know you.
Well, so I'm something like a public enemy in Romania.
Right.
Because everyone hates me.
Why?
And that's very intriguing. Like, usually progressives tend to say that, oh, he's overly conservative, is something like a sovereignist. The people on the other side of the spectrum says, no, he's with Soros. He's definitely paid by Soros. Because right now we're somehow living in a dichotomy where we have only two kind of views right now in Romania. Either you are like pro-Western, progressive somehow, pro-Israel, against Georgescu, pro-EU, or you are on the other side being pro-Russian, anti-Ukraine, pro-Palestine, conservative, orthodox. Because the mainstream media and the people that are right now in all the Romanian deep state wanted that things would be that way. You actually, to control the people, you need to have them only in two sides.
Preferably as self-contradictory as possible.
Exactly. And when you have like a third position that somehow has, let's say, attributes from each one of the sides and tries an equilibrium.
That don't exist.
Well,
in either of them.
Exactly. In that moment, okay, now that's off. Absolutely. We don't have a pattern to put that guy on it. He's fascist, but wait, at the exactly same moment, okay, he's somehow condemning fascism, but maybe he's pro-Russian because he studies about the Russian influence in the Orthodox Church. But in the same time, he's against the war in Ukraine. Fuck it. They don't understand nothing about it. So, let's begin from scratch. I have somewhere around 20 years of experience in the whole nationalist, orthodox, currently sovereignist areas in Romania, because I know all the current leaders when they weren't quite that mainstream they were at that time. Not to say I was at the beginning of my teenage period when I got to know them. And at that time, as I was only, let's say, that cute child that can be somehow great for our future plans, but afterwards that person actually aged up and started becoming a pain in the ass. Because always I had this idea that we should contest any idea.
Or challenge.
But we should challenge it by any means, and we shouldn't leave like anything, like we should just take it for granted. And usually people right now in Romania and in the last 35 years are the victims of a transition. They want to do something great in the 90s after the fall of the communist regime. And that current generation is right now somehow a generation of people that are utterly neglected by the social status that they should have, let's say, that should be recognized by the people through elections. They didn't went out in politics. They didn't manage to take power in the 90s. They didn't manage to take in the first half of 2000. And they want somehow to get in front and say, this is our last train to do something great in politics.
Right, so it's a frustration.
It's basically a frustration. And somehow I grew up with them, but I didn't want it to be part of those frustrated ideas, because we don't want to have our future in someone's past. All right? So I started building up my own ideas, my own way of saying things. And I started somehow to try to recreate a link between what was before communism in Romania and what actually should have been around here afterwards. Well, it didn't happen because people didn't want this kind of continuity when it comes to political ideas. We did have some sort of liberalism in the interwar period. Nobody tried to continue it after the 90s. Everybody somehow, in a way or another, tried to refetch a way of socialism, even it was some sort, let's say, national, pro-European, doesn't matter, but it's still socialism. Everybody's mostly socialistic in Romania. 90% actually think socialist. And when I was in high school, for example, I started challenging the system. And this idea of challenging the school system, the hierarchy that is established by the state, is seen somehow as a heresy in nationalist, orthodox, right-wing areas of the political spectrum in Romania, because they are mostly going for the idea that the state should be actually the most powerful person around.
Yeah, too many right-wingers are effectively statists.
They're fully statist. The idea of having some sort of, let's say, an orthodox libertarianism sounds as a second heresy to them. So I was somehow put to a margin. I got, okay, let's challenge the system. And I was actually the first person in Romania to challenge biometrics in schools. I was actually at the end of my whole school period, and at that time the Ministry of Education, and through the different local institutions, they tried in all the schools of Romania to introduce something like magnetic cards for catalogs. They wanted retinal scans while you go to the school.
Or access by fingerprint.
Yeah, access by fingerprint, as if we were in a Black Mesa facility.
Right.
And
very Black Mirror type of shit.
And nobody was like, I don't know, this is the future, we should try to be modern. You know, they have this kind of stuff in schools abroad, and that's
they
why...
They really don't, but...
there were actually some grifts made by some IT firms, and actually, example, in a school, I don't want to name it, but actually, it is a long time since then, I actually hacked the system and scrambled all the information in order to prove that it wasn't actually secure. And the only thing secure when it comes to saying if one pupil was in school at a certain time or not is actually the marks in the catalog.
Yeah.
We had physical catalogs.
Grades,
you have the grades, you have the presence being taken on. All right, you're there, but not through an electronic system. Afterwards, coming to faculty, I understood that the whole idea of higher education isn't as romantically I saw it back then when I was in high school, that it's just a place where you can develop yourself and cultivate knowledge. It's actually the continuation of a post-industrial etatist educational system that just wants to create happy slaves. Okay, you need proper employees for the multinational companies, mostly for call centers and stuff like that, and you shouldn't try in a way or another to be unobedient to the rectors, the deans, and all the academic stuff. And that's why I tried in those years to create some sort of revolution in my first part of my student life. And afterwards, after 2 years trying all this kind of ideas, trying to enter other organizations to make hostile takeovers, it didn't work out. That's when I actually learned, like the first phase, if you want to counter a center of power, you start to build up at the periphery of it. And that's when I created Liga Studenților. It's actually, Liga Studenților is the first student organization in Romania that was put up after the days of the 89 revolution. But at the beginning of the 2000s, it's actually just disappeared, both legally and de facto, because nobody cared about it and because of the power of Iliescu and the PSD and the new, practically neo-communist regime that came back to power. And I tried actually to create the only conservative and freedom-orientated student organization in Romania, because when we speak about conservative students, we can talk about Orthodox or Catholic students that they do have their associations, but they do something like cute stuff, like let's make something for children that are in poverty. Let's try to sing carols, but they do not have that kind of campus activism that is required to clean up the cancer of political correctness and woke ideology that in those years started building up in Romanian universities. In 2013, when I started talking against the idea of wokeism in Romania, usually conservatives would say, "I know you're a conspiracy theorist. We won't have that stuff in Romania. What, transgenders in schools? No way. Those kind of stuff won't happen. We won't have LGBT marches where over half of the people attending would be under the age of consent." Everybody said, "I know that guy is crazy. Don't listen to him." And it was only a matter of years when conspiracy theory actually became reality, and I wasn't a madman anymore, or at least partially. And that was like the first thing, because in Romania we have over 200 student NGOs that are mostly leaning on the left wing or are directly with LGBTQ, wokeism, please bring immigrants because we need to internationalize our universities. They have this kind of shitty leftist talk because they're usually financed through European grants. They are linked with all the source organizations and so on. And nobody actually acknowledged in the academia the danger of this kind of organizations, the idea that they can actually muster future academics in the universities. We had that case, for example, at the university in Bucharest, a guy that came up at the admission commission wearing a skirt. Somehow I don't know how he identified himself as being autonomous whale, doesn't matter. But everyone just laughed about the idea that, okay, he came up with a skirt, we should try to bring him into an ethics commission. Well, you don't have the legal ground for that. And that he's a specialist in, I can recall actually his studies in discriminating women in video games. Like, okay, why don't we do like the same thing, but from a conservative perspective, okay? What's the perspective of seeing, for example, the Romanian principalities in strategy and history games? Are they historically accurate? Do we have a historically accurate representation of Romanians in video games? Let's try to finance somebody to study that and create a talking point about it, okay? Let's lecture companies about it. Okay, let's have an angry letter towards Microsoft because we don't have a Romanian civilization in Age of Empires through the definitive edition. That are actually the things that somebody, a conservative NGO should have done in Romania. But usually conservatives in Romania are like, oh, let's boo that guy. Let's make a petition towards the government and say, oh, please, we don't want progressives anywhere. And that's that. I have another example. We have an social and economic council that's somehow some sort of an autonomous institution in Romania that gives its attention on legislative projects in the parliament and says, okay, we're okay with that, but or we're not, but nobody gives a damn what
It's purely
the chess
consultative,
is
yeah.
purely consultative, but it's somehow meaningful when it comes to going out in press. And I, for example, in the last 8 years, I almost yelled at conservatives, okay, just try to get your NGOs on that government platform, try to put all your papers into order, go you to your, like our national IRS office, try and be clean with everything so that we can actually propose conservative people in this body. Nobody gave a damn. Everybody goes, we will see when we're going to have problems, what are you going to do? We don't deal with this kind of worldly stuff. We're only with the spiritual ones. And it didn't work out because the progressives got their people inside.
Of course.
We had an aggressive left-wing gal that proposed the idea of, okay, sex for everybody in high schools and stuff like that. And everybody was like, okay, we don't want that lady over there. We cannot do nothing. It was democratically voted by the NGOs that got themselves on that platform. All right? So let's try and actually make conservatism being some sort of a professional way of doing politics in Romania, because everybody right now thinks that Trump won by himself the elections, and that's false.
Of course.
Because we could not imagine Trump being reelected without the think tanks, all the conservative, the classic liberal, the libertarian think tanks in America that during all these years created an elite that could actually propose the idea of freedom, of free market and so on, that Trump just went on those ideas. All right?
And especially now, after the election, the whole flurry of policy, executive orders, and all of that comes
from those respective think tanks.
Entirely comes from the think tanks, because ultimately knowing exactly where the Democrat/left-wing centers of power are and targeting them specifically for defunding or funding freezes and whatnot. You see how crazy leftists are these days because all of them are just losing their jobs all at once, like a simultaneous salvo of a war. Well, that is only possible through a huge network of think tanks who've been writing the policy papers and have been studying all of these things for years in a way that wasn't the case in the first Trump administration. The first Trump administration was pretty amateurish. It had no idea who its enemies are. Now the second Trump administration, mostly with the same people. I mean, Stephen Miller hadn't read the bylaws that kept so many of the bureaucrats in office even after they had won the election. Now Stephen Miller had read the bills, and they're like, yeah, no, that's unconstitutional. Yeah, you're going to get physically escorted out of office. But being able to do that requires an army of people, a literal army of people, doing all of the policy wonk type of...
That need to be paid.
Yes.
And they need to be well directed. Because unfortunately, we don't have in Romania something like the Heritage Foundation. We don't have serious conservative think tanks.
Yeah, or the Federalist Society or any of that.
We don't have a conservative press, actually.
Very few.
Well, very few, actually, but it's like mostly sovereignist. We're going to talk about it, but not conservative.
That would be in the next video, yes.
Yeah. But. And that's why people are like, we call it doing things like the firefighters. We just wait for the fire to come out, and afterwards we react to the problem. We don't do something like a preemptive attack on the left or try to create our own elites. Because after the thing with that guy from the Faculty of Letters of the University in Bucharest, I started talking with some conservative sponsors. And they were like, no, we don't think we should create an elite. Okay, just get hired and try working like something like a part-time job or something. Why should we pay you to be a conservative elite? Like, people don't have the consciousness in Romania right now to finance something on the right in order to counteract all this left-wing bullshit that people think that, okay, Trump came to the White House and in 4 weeks we won't have leftists anymore.
Yeah,
that's false.
That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
Because if the Great Old Party won't be elected in the next 4 years afterwards, if things in Europe won't start changing, if we're gonna still have a mostly progressive, actually orientated elite in Romania, we could actually be some sort of a bastion of the left. We can become one.
Yeah.
That's the actual truth.
Yeah, locally here. Things
Locally
get worse.
here, like we want to maintain the democratic civilization. In the memory of Joe Biden and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There are actually people that in the mainstream press they can recover from the shock that the landslide re-election of Trump created for them. They still criticize him. They still don't understand what's happening in Europe. They say, okay, Trump is crippling Europe. No, Europe by its bureaucrats crippled itself.
Trump is just noticing it.
Yeah, and Trump actually starts and gives a great boost to actually redefining the European Union as it was once created. And I think that's a great benefit right now of the Trump administration effect on the European Union, all right? Because in the Cold War, the Washington power didn't talk directly to Brussels. It would talk directly to every respective state. Why would Trump talk directly with Ursula von der Leyen? I cannot understand this whole concept. I mean,
he doesn't either. That's why. That's why.
Well,
not only she wasn't invited to the inauguration.
I just was fed up with all this stupid nonsense of doing things not professional in the conservative NGO
over the
area.
years, the Students League turned in primarily into a judicial activism. Quasi-federalist society.
Something like that, and it's starting right now to be in a whole process of becoming actually a think tank. And because we started from something like grassroots stuff like 12 years ago, we just were against some elections that happened in our university, and now we almost don't care about this kind of small stuff. We only go for the big problems. And gradually, in 3 years, we extended on the whole city of Iași. We came from just university. Afterwards, in 3 years, we started expanding again on national level. And for 2 years, we also expanded in Moldova. So right now, we have actually offices in 5 cities. And we are in a whole expansion process. We are right now the only student NGO in Romania that doesn't have its headquarters paid by university. We're solely independent. We don't receive funding from universities. We pay our own rent here, where we actually film. And we are mostly financed through private donors. And also we sometimes do access public grants, but on the idea if other NGOs try grifting stuff, why wouldn't we also do the same things? Because if we don't take money from public funds, a leftist organization will. And on the basis of competition, okay, let's do that also. Yeah. That sounds a great idea. And we have 3 primary domains of expertise. And I think the most relevant one is actually the one that you noted, civic and primarily judicial activism. And I think there are some stuff that should be noted. For example, in 2018, we've blocked the Ministry of Education initiative to create a program for parents so that parents would actually learn sex education. That was a 68 million euro program that would benefit all of the left. They wanted to create something like a sexual trainees, so that those sexual trainees could learn parents how to talk with their children about sex. Okay, what should their kids stick up in their asses and stuff like that.
Which was both a grift but also an ideologically subvertive
idea, because
project,
they actually stated that the whole project, it was actually in the fundaments of the decision, It was against the conservative idea of a family, against traditional family. And it was okay, fuck it, no, this should be utterly blocked. I can recall, for example, in the COVID-19 pandemic, we were also the only entity that fought against stupid restrictions and having those QRs in exams and going to faculty only on the basis of a QR. We cut that, we went in court, we had decisions on it, and basically because of that, students weren't actually obliged to get vaxxed during the COVID pandemic. And also we were mostly always the only voice, and I'm gonna explain why mostly, the only independent voice that actually kicked in everybody, okay? Now PSD is governing, let's kick PSD. Is now PNL in government, let's fuck up PNL. Will our government, all right, let's kick some ass in our too. Because we don't mind who is actually governing. We are only interested in ideas and in principles.
Yeah, and as long as our ideas get forwarded, that's great. If they're not, well,
Exactly.
screw you,
And
whoever
I say
you are.
almost because there are certain moments in your activity as an NGO where people do tend to say, okay, why don't you actually say something on that subject or on that subject? Because we don't have the time. The workflow is just too great to try to do something. And also we're the first student conservative NGO that tried, and it's currently making public policy, but on a conservative libertarian point of view. Because everything that comes from the students usually is socialist based.
Yeah, upholds the state.
Actually, any public policy should be actually resumed to please give money. Okay, give money, make students some sort, let's say, more dependent to the state, and stuff like that. And we don't want that. And also, we're the first to create the idea that we shouldn't be against students in Romania. We're somehow formed in all these years in a syndicalistic, socialist manner, as if they were in a union, in labor unions and stuff like that. And no.
Which is why it's funny, because in English they're actually called student unions.
Student unions, yeah. We don't have that in Romania. Basically, they're NGOs. If you are 3 people, you can create an NGO in Romania. It's that liberal. And we're the only one to say no. We aren't in some sort of war with firms, with the private sector. We are actually partnering with it because they pay for everything, okay? We are actually working. We should have lower income taxes. We should actually lower taxes in general because everyone will benefit from that. Nobody came with that idea. Nobody put up Hayek's ideas in a public policy except Liga Studenților. And also, we created this sort of talking point when it comes to activism that somehow started building up some terrain, some ground in this orthodox nationalistic areas of our society. For example, in the pandemic, we stated, okay, cut your ideas of being against vaccinations and all those rules because of I don't know what element would be in the vaccine. Read Hayek and try defending your position from a Hayekian point of view, okay?
Or at the very least from a legal standpoint, where you can actually win in court and get your policy.
Let's try an
anyway.
economic point of view. If an idea that comes from, let's say, prospective idea from the government is useful actually for the society would just buy it. Okay? You want a vaccine? Great. Okay. But don't stick it out my neck. If it's good, I'm going to buy it and take the shot myself. That's the basic libertarian standpoint on anything. And nobody had this kind of talk in higher education. Yeah? And you also try to liberalize. You cannot have, for example, like there's a Romanian channel in Dodi, it's like very libertarian. You cannot have this kind of politics being proposed in Romania. I repeat myself, being a mostly socialist society. You some sort need a form of moderate libertarianism in order to make this kind of public policy be digested by population. And I'm going to give only one example. Why wouldn't the government give, for example, not give the money directly to the universities when it comes to financing public higher education, but actually give me some sort of a voucher, and I can actually choose what I want to study at what university, and afterwards the whole thing would be liberalized. Well, that kind of idea
It's
is
a
actually
gradualist approach. Yeah.
it's a gradualist approach, but anyhow, it's just killing the dreams of the left.
Yeah, because it disrupts their cash cow, effectively.
Exactly.
In any event, and then as years went by, and especially after the pandemic project, you guys started going beyond just strictly students' interests. That's when we got to meet each other. We quite literally met in court as we were both challenging the government. I mean, I'm not even joking. And you started going beyond just student interests. I mean, most
We're stuck in geopolitics.
yeah, not just geopolitics, but now you have like the Minister of Propaganda, which is a very old journo who usually shills for the regime, doesn't matter who the regime is due in court, I think, next month on a complaint that you guys filed for effectively comparing Orthodox pilgrims to Hamas. And more recently, because that's we're slowly transitioning into our main topic today, you filed a criminal complaint against the current culture minister for alleged negligence, legally speaking.
Abuse in office.
Yeah,
actually.
in the whole hula baloo about the robbery in the Netherlands. Right, where what's the, I guess, the Coțofenești helmet. Yeah, the robbery in the Netherlands, effectively, which is a huge shit show for the current regime, actually, both in the Netherlands and here, but especially here. So that's, you have to admit, that's way beyond the initial scope of just students' interest.
Yeah, and people actually ask, okay, what's the link between a student NGO and actually defending something like old antique treasury? Actually, we do have a great respect for whatever comes to culture, and we actually do have projects based on culture. We go like in all churches, we clean up all books, we restore all the church items and stuff like that. So actually we do have some knowledge about it, and actually we are in the process of accrediting ourselves as individuals who work on that stuff. And for 2 years we work in Romanian libraries in Mount Athos. So yeah, we do know some stuff about culture. So we just
antiques,
we didn't
generally.
just fell off a plane or stuff like that. And actually Lucian is in a house full of antiques, because we're working for over 10 years. We're actually collecting antiques regarding old student organizations. And we want to create a museum of the student movement in Romania, because actually the whole idea of student activism is just put it under a cover when it comes to the history of the universities back here. And we actually discovered that we have a whole generation of students that done activism throughout Romania's history. Actual Romania's modern history
starts with students.
Yeah. The modern state was created by a generation of students, and afterwards you just have generation of student leaders that actually had a certain plan, and they just went through it in full. Even the Great Union in 1918 was done by students, and so on.
Yeah,
so
the independence in 1878.
Yeah, it was generation.
He was the former president of the student union.
Yeah, they were just student leaders, and okay, I think actually that is the same point. We should try from that. Nobody actually started doing that. We should try recreating Romania once again from a student elite, but attention, that isn't corrupted by power. That isn't corrupted by ideology, because some elites at one time in history were corrupted towards left-leaning side of the political spectrum. We had that actually with the generation that created our modern state, but that was also like the only great generation of student leaders that was on the left side of history, let's say. But coming back to Turcan and all the issue with the Coțofenești helmet, actually that's a helmet dating from the 5th century before Christ. alongside with 3 Dacian bracelets. It's debatable if the helmet, if it's jetae, like jetic, or if it's skitic. It doesn't matter right now, because in Romania, progressives were like, okay, just some Dacian thing was stolen, not interesting. They tried somehow to make a mockery out of it, or say that Georgescu and its followers tried to steal it, or to let's say crown their king and stuff like that. It's just a mockery, because in Romania we have this issue right now, and that's the basis actually of the discussion regarding our ancestry. All right, like every European people has an substrata of a barbaric civilization, let's call it barbaric in general in Anglo-Saxon terms, like the Gauls for the French, the Germanic tribe for the Germans. We have the Picts, the Scots, and so on, all the tribes that were in Britain before the Roman conquest. We have the Latin Roman stratum, and afterwards there are some adstrata Slavic for Romanian and so on. But usually, right now we have a full current in Romania that tries to undermine the sole existence of a Dacian substratum in our civilization, just because some crazy people back in the communist regime had the idea that we aren't Latin or Roman, but that Rome was created by the Dacians.
Yeah, most of the proto-chronists thought
the
it was an
proto-chronists thought
ideological project.
during the communist, actually during Ceausescu's regime.
Yeah,
that
the National Communist Party.
National Communist regime that was actually a counter against the idea that was evoked some 2 decades ago during the Stalinist occupation, that were rather more Slavic.
Prior.
Yeah. So, because of people like CTP, it's like I don't want to pronounce his name, like fuck him, okay? People that say that, okay, we are in Dacian, we should forget about the idea, only having a point of view based only on the proto-chronistic point of view that was elaborated, and people right now are saying that, Christ is even born in Dacia, and Dacia is the center of the universe and stuff like that, okay? Doesn't mind, just forget about it. But actually, doesn't matter if it's Dacian or Scythic, it's part of our history, okay? Legally speaking, it was part of a cultural good that is property of the Romanian Ministry of Culture and the Romanian National History Museum. And it's made out of pure gold. And imagine that the whole thing with the theft happened in the worst moment for the current political governing coalition.
Yes.
Because on the 25th of January, it was the same date that the National Liberal Party had its National Congress
to endorse their
new candidate.
Meet the new candidate, same as the old
Crin
candidate.
Antonescu, that actually was ad interim president of Romania during the time that Băsescu was suspended. Yeah.
And also a candidate himself in 2009 came up third when he was much younger and much more active in politics.
Well, he didn't want to take the lead again in 2014. And I do recall, and that's very funny, because one of the greatest endorsers of Crin Antonescu today is actually Raluca Turcan, who was the Ministry of Culture at the time that the Coțofenești Helmet and the Dacian bracelets were taken into the exhibit in Holland. Well, the whole issue is legal, firstly. What was the legal norm at the time of the organizing of the exhibition? Raluca Turcan modified the legislation before a similar exhibition that took place at the end of 2023 in Rome. But at that exhibit, all the objects that were taken to Italy were taken through a military convoy, safely sealed, with military and paramilitary security. Right now, when they were taken to Holland, absolutely no security being taken into account by the Romanian government. Well, in that law, she stated, because it was her initiative, that in order to issue a government order, you need to have more institution, more than one, being implicating in the organizing of the exhibition. Well, after the theft happened, she publicly stated that there were over 18 museums in the exhibit.
There you go. So that's more than one.
Yeah, but after some, I think, judiciary scholars in PNL say, okay, just shut the fuck up and change your statement. She started saying, oh no, only the National Museum of History was actually in the exhibit. And some sort of truth there is, because the contract of the exhibit is only bilateral between the National Museum of History in Romania and the Drents Museum in Assen in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. But wait a minute, through law, also the Ministry of Culture should have been implicated. And you have all the other museums that actually had goods that was borrowed from them for the exhibit. So then you should have had an executive order. And speaking with people in the opposition, they didn't want to make a penal
A criminal complaint.
a criminal complaint against Raluca Turcan only because of politics. Okay, we won't do that bad to her because we want to obtain something from PNL. The same thing with Tower, the same thing with all the political parties. Okay, let's play. Let's file up a criminal complaint against Raluca Turcan and see what happens. Okay,
Because you don't want to obtain anything from PNL.
We don't want to obtain anything from anybody, so we're free to do anything. And that's the great thing
beauty of
the beauty of being really independent. And imagine that the whole mainstream media, excepting G4 media, just took our press release and everybody talk about the subject. Everybody, okay, Turcan is fucked, and we actually started a hashtag, send Turcan to jail. This is just a phase of our common project, Aplatism PNL, like flattening PNL. Like PNL wanted to flatten the curve in pandemic. When PNL asked us to stay in our homes.
Yeah, so we stayed indoors and started thinking of, well, how about we flatten the national liberals? Now here I should probably make some mentions for our foreign friends. G4 Media is a quasi... No.
Yeah, it stands for Gay for Media or Germany for Media.
Germany for Media.
Okay, I know Cristi Pantazi or Tapalaga, if you watch this, okay, I'm sorry. Please answer to my messages. Thank you.
Yeah, they're funded effectively by the BND in Germany. Sometimes through the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, sometimes straight up from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Deutschland. But we basically call them Germany for Media because they do serve the German interests and they generally support the left. But they've also shown some editorial independence sometimes, much to the desperation of their biggest fans. You
can see it in the comments.
Yeah, especially in the comments, yeah, you can see that. And they're also one of the few that still maintain a comment section, which is commendable in and of itself, let's face it. I mean,
quite appreciable.
Yeah, even Hoyt News eventually started abolishing some of their comment sections. Now only some articles have open comments. We generally refer to them because they're very pro-establishmentarian, and when they start sounding like us, that's one of the measure of victory eventually, right? I mean, when they start sounding like us, they're like, okay, so we can count that one as also one on the narrative. And that matters quite a bit because most of the elite watches those spaces. So it's effectively, you're doing in court very similar to what we're doing on the sofa, which is we don't care how many views and subscribers we get.
It's about the effect.
Yeah, it's about the effect. I mean, if everyone sounds like me 10 minutes after I publish, then that's a very good measure of success. So there's that. But the robbery in the Netherlands came in the worst moment possible not just because they were announcing their new candidate, but also because they were starting to successfully push back against the sovereignists, and we're going to talk about the sovereignists in the next video. And then this one is actually very politically exploitable, not just by the quote-unquote sovereignists, and again, we're going to clarify that in the next video, but basically for everyone who is not with the regime. Because it's free, open air, like an open goal in football in front of, you get a very nice pass in the middle of the 16-yard box, and an open goal, just score, mate, because it's the best fuck the regime type of narrative, already pre-written by the
It was very
in the
funny
Netherlands.
because Crin Antonescu, the runner-up for PNL in the presidential election, was something like, oh, no, let's close the subject because extremists can profit from it. Why, thank you. You just named extremists, all the people that actually have a problem with you sending, without any legal backup, one of the greatest golden treasures of Romania to the Netherlands in a small museum.
Yeah, that's also quite dubious. I mean, Drent's Museum, with all the respect to their work there, it's really not a highly important museum, right? And why the hell was this highly valuable, some would say even invaluable piece of treasure there? I mean, I can understand in the Central Museum in Rome or whatever, okay, fine. But again, Drent's Museum is the museum equivalent of the County Vaslui History Museum. I mean, it's not really an important institution. Why was it there?
It's actually true that Holland has a different approach on its localities and all the administrative issue. But I do tend to think right now that the current, well, right now, director of our National History Museum, Mr. Ernest Oberlander Trinoveanu, he's a numismat. Okay, he's all passionate about old coins, and I think he had a personal link with the director in Drent's Museum because the museum in Drent's is based on old coins, and I think that's my catch on it. Second, the great issue is also with the contract, because when the contract was signed, Mr. Oberlander should have asked Turcan for a government order in order to be covered with the whole exhibition. He didn't do that. That's first thing first. Second, the Dutch part of the contract, the Drent's Museum, had specific security measures that would have been been taken in.
Yeah, and were not in place during
they,
the day.
They were not enforced.
Yeah.
Okay. We understand that they weren't enforced at all. So, basically, we have 2 points of the problem. That's the responsibility on the Romanian side, but also on the Dutch one. All right? So, everybody was like, oh, let's be solidary with the Drent's Museum. The Drent's Museum actually on its first page on the internet was, thank you for all your messages. We need right now peace and solidarity, blah, 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 blah. No, Drent's Museum, please go fuck yourself and issue a statement that you are sorry in the name of the Romanian people. You should have apologized to the Romanian people for what had happened.
Fuck up, effectively.
Exactly. Yeah. You didn't do that. And it's just crazy.
No, of course
and nobody apologized for anything. And I do understand right now, for example, Dutch investors in Romania, because they don't want that Dutch people create themselves a bad name because of all this crazy stuff that happened. And they actually issued a bounty on the heads of the thieves. But one thing that need to be clarified, it isn't like that kind of gold theft that would be done by a Roma clan, you know?
No, it's a more professional hit.
It's a more professional hit. And it's actually done for the work of arts themselves. Because mostly the thing would be that a collector actually said, okay, I want that.
And subcontracts the job to some professional.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do that, okay? Because otherwise, right now the suspects, they were put to choose between having their photos on the internet or give envelopes. And they were like, okay, fuck it, we're going to give us our photos to be put on the internet. Okay, we done it. Okay, how punitive. Dutch police.
Yeah.
Excuse me, talking from a point of a narco state that has great issues on controlling
the
flow of drugs.
And not just drugs.
I really want to put a question. Maybe the idea of not admitting Romania into Schengen was because Constanța would take Rotterdam's place on the drug market? I really want to put that question.
Definitely on the drug trail.
Yeah, okay. So you had your princess stating that she didn't want to get out in your capital because of immigrants, like 2 years ago?
Yeah, because of the Moroccan clans who control also the drug trade.
So, why would you take actually precious artifacts into a country that also has great problems with burglaries, and mostly with art theft? Okay, you have a history of art theft in Holland.
Oh yeah, it's not even a new thing. Yeah.
That's the moment when people start putting up questions. And those conspiracy theorists that say, maybe the helmet was the price we paid for Schengen. Well, maybe they're right. Like, give one precise argument based on the facts that it wasn't that way. Okay? The contract wasn't respected. You didn't have an executive order. No logic in organizing the exhibit. And also, no security from the Romanian side as you had in Rome. Okay, here in Iași, we're like 350,000 inhabitants. And when the same bracelets made out of pure gold came to Iași, on the exhibit site, you would have gendarmes, something like a SWAT equivalent, guarding them whilst you can just stare at them and make photos of them.
But you had
in Iași, in Romania.
Yeah, but you had either the gendarmerie or even military police.
Yeah, in Romania, but you just send them into a country museum in Holland with no security and no guarantees for local security and so on. In a contract, you as a signatory, representative of the signatory, speaking about Mr. Robert Lanternoveanu, you should have taken all the measures necessary to see if the other part is respecting their obligations, right?
And they clearly were.
Did the National Museum of History send some addresses towards the museum in Assen regarding the security protocol? Because it's written in the contract. Do we have anything? Why anybody is actually talking about this?
Yeah, it's precisely why I'm skeptical of the claim that it was a price paid for Schengen, because
I'm also skeptical.
Because if that had been the case, at least they would have gotten their paperwork in order.
Exactly.
Usually when these kinds of deals are cut, the paperwork is squeaky clean and shockingly impeccable. I'm more inclined to suspect generalized incompetence, because it's also not the first time.
Yeah, but excuse me, we have a counter-conspiracy theory that's way funnier than the sovereignist one, and it's coming from the progressive pro-European part.
Yeah, the good people.
Yeah, the good people. Yeah. Okay, and this is a conspiracy theory that just shines in the dark. Well, the heist was done by the Russians to create an eclipse on the candidacy of the leader of the pro-European party in the next presidential elections. It was all done by Georgescu and his Russian mobs.
Henchmen and mobs and whatnot. All right, but to eclipse who? Căin
Antonescu, yeah.
Really? I mean, that's crazy. Especially given that Căin Antonescu eclipses himself just by simply existing. So there's
please understand, he's actually a great successor in the PNL point of view, for Iohannis, he has problems waking up in the morning. He is unemployed for 10 years.
Yeah, has been unemployed for the last decade. Yeah.
He lives on the earnings of his wife.
Yeah, he's been living off his wife, at least legally speaking.
Legally speaking, okay. And he has alcohol problems.
I don't think he has those anymore, but used to, yes.
At least look like.
Used to. The thing is that I like that it's one of the few cases where I actually agree with the left-wing think tank, with Mr. Ionita, who basically put it that this is a rotation between Putin and Medvedev, right? It's a rotation between the Comrade Iohannis and Comrade Antonescu. And to be fair, it's actually not a wrong take.
Yeah.
Because Iohannis is president as a result of Antonescu's work between 2012 and 2014. He's the one who brought him from Social Democrat circles into the National Liberal leadership. So now it's basically an attempt at rotating the cadre.
Exactly.
And since they don't have any younger cadre, well, I guess we're going to have to reactivate the old
So
guy.
basically, Antonescu created the first Social Liberal Union, and Iohannis blessed the third. So it's the same thing.
Yeah, so now why not bring the original Social Liberal back into into leadership position? Nevertheless, I don't think that is the case. But do the progressives have, because this sounds like a regime conspiracy to eclipse Queen Antonescu. Do the progressives have their own conspiracy on this?
Well, they actually don't tend to have one, but they tend to overpower right now the Dutch authorities on the issue. Like, we should only base our whole stakes or on what the Dutch want to do about it. Okay, we should have 100% faith in the Dutch police and so on.
That sounds even worse.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't trust the Dutch authorities on anything.
They try somehow to protect right now the Dutch authorities and also some part of the progressive, also the National Museum of History, for all that happened. Because I think here there are some progressives in Romania that actually are very sorry for what happened to Mr. Oberlander Târnoveanu, the ex-director of the National Museum of History, because he's taken a very important role in Romania in the last 20 years. Our National Museum of History was closed for over 2 decades. All right? We don't have a proper National History Museum. And whenever somebody tried to take out this talking point out publicly, you're a conspiracy theorist. Boo. You are proto-chronistic. And what, you want people just to look at stones?
Well, yes, actually.
We are the only European nation that doesn't have a national museum of its own to present its own national history. And we also say that, you see, in Europe, other elites don't mock their own country's history. But in Romania,
it's still fashionable, yes.
It's still fashionable.
Yes.
And it's all because people like Lucian Boia, because I know he's partially translated into English and can be accessible to the English audience. In Romania, after the fall of the communist regime, we had this current of taking away the myths from the proto-chronist period. And people
debunking Commie era myths,
exactly,
which was a legitimate goal, because there was quite a bit to debunk.
But there are myths that were actually created through cinematography. Now, who in the West goes right now to debunk Russell Crowe and Robin Hood? Okay? Who in the West started spitting on Mel Gibson's Braveheart? I do ask you that.
That's very rare. It happens, but it's very rare.
It's very rare, and nobody actually gives attention to that because those films are artistic at first. Okay, you have a historical motive that is presented in an artistical, fashionable, Hollywoodian way. We have the same thing in Romania. Actually, I do think that, and actually, some years ago on International Movie Database in the history movie top, Mihai Viteazu was actually, I think, the first historical movie based on the reviews, because the whole movie is done without CGI. You have real props, real actors, all those thousands of people on the field.
They were for real.
They were for real. That usually there were soldiers that had done their military training during when the filming was done.
I know someone who got paid. They were open recruitments on the street for
exactly.
That. Yeah, I know.
And those films actually created a sort of national pride for Romanians. Okay, and you need that national pride in order to exist as a nation. Okay, right now, when it comes to, let's say, speaking about going to war with Russia, 75% of our population even don't want to hear about that.
Yeah.
Okay, only a quarter would go to war, because everyone is actually asking, why should I die? For what? For bureaucrats.
Yeah, who are fighting for?
Yeah, bureaucrats that just take our money and go out in fancy vacations and pay off their horse. Should we die for a state that rips off anything from us, and we need to work 8 out of 12 months a year for the state? We should die for what? A corrupt government and corrupt politicians that just say, oh, our history is shit, we don't actually exist as a people? As long as you don't have a national pride going on in your nation, you're dead. Okay, it's the first rule that Sun Tzu actually learns you when you read The Art of War. Okay, we were demoralized from inside all these years,
And mostly intentional. Some of it was not intentional, but
but
a lot
mostly
of
intentional.
it was.
And right
yes.
now, the progressives, that all this stuff going around with the theft, they do continue this kind of the motivation. They need it.
Yeah, because they don't know better, and they really don't have an alternative story. The good news is, I guess, it doesn't work, because this one is such a self-evident fuck up that the progressive story just doesn't work. You can't really apply progressivism on this one. I mean, you can, but even so, Nietzsche doesn't believe it. I mean, it just doesn't work like that. But yes, a lot of it was intentional. The demoralization was intentional, although I will still argue it did start from something real, because in 1990 there was way too much BS going on, and something had to be done about that. But unfortunately, the wrong people got tasked.
Well, there is a conspiracy theory, actually, that Alin Georgescu and his followers took the helmet. Okay. Doesn't stand.
Yeah, that one doesn't stand that much either, because it would be quite difficult, first of all, because, well, thing is that this guy hasn't...
Don't underestimate the Russian mafia.
No, the reason I'm saying this is because I've just published an entire history of this guy on the Romanian language channel, which created a lot of hullabaloo even among his followers. But and I also published a shorter video in English about that, and where I said that think of Klaus Schwab, but not that successful, just slightly less successful. I mean, that's
We want Klaus Schwab, but we have Klaus Schwab at home.
Yeah,
Klaus Schwab at home.
Klaus Schwab at home. Yes. So the guy has been very transparent about his grifts, right? And he mostly grifted, well, Western money, right? Either via UN or via the State Department in the late 1990s, the US State Department during the second Clinton administration, sometimes with the European Union, but not so successful with the European Union. I guess even he doesn't like the EU bureaucracy. So the idea that he's been grifting tens of millions from Russia and somehow nobody noticed it for 34 years, I'm just not going to believe that, because much smaller Russian grifts became visible within months, even for people who weren't looking for them. So this idea that he's been able to use Russian money to pay for a heist in the Netherlands to get his own hat, no, I can't believe that. It's a bit too extraordinary. It's the kind of extraordinary claim that would require extraordinary evidence. Okay, if it comes, I'll eat my words, but...
no, that's a real conspiracy theory.
Yeah, but it would be quite extraordinary if that turns out to be the case. All right, so now you're basically using the procedure is God type of mantra that we always use on the sofa, and you're basically attacking the regime on their own procedure.
Well, I don't always love it because usually procedure sucks. I have a trauma from the pandemic where the Iași Court of Appeal issued a decision stating that the University of Medicine and Pharmacy decision from June was taken to in respect of a decision in the future in September. So I don't like procedure that much because there are some corners in procedure and you can get stuck in that and you don't have a way to get out. But when procedure fits our interest, we go all the way through.
And what do you hope to achieve with the
First thing,
criminal complaint?
send Turcan to jail. Eventually, okay, let's be realistic. She won't go to jail.
At least not on this file.
Yeah, but I think the most important thing, I think Mr. Oberlander Târnoveanu and his allies shouldn't be in power anymore at the National History Museum because 20 years is enough.
Yeah.
And we need a real debate about this museum, about financing it, about actually restoring it because the whole building is in a state of almost collapse. It's ranked, I think, in the first class level of being under earthquake risk. And that's a terrible thing because a lot of precious objects can be lost in an eventuality of an earthquake. That's one thing first, create a debate in society. Second,
can this be done? I mean, the museums are not particularly a high priority in societal debate in our country.
You see, usually all political debates are rounded up in socialist countries around education and healthcare. With the whole problem in Ukraine, it's starting also going on defense and foreign politics. But I think it's a good point to put alongside education and healthcare also culture, because it's a problem of culture. And also it's a problem of making the whole cultural regime more liberal in Romania, because the great issue is that we have a great state monopoly. For example, in Romania, only the state can have museums and those respective institutions can legally name themselves as museums, all right?
Yeah, there are private museums, but they're not legally called museums, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, we should try to once create more punitive laws regarding issues with messing in history. I'm going to give only one example. When it came to the destruction of archives, it was sanctioned by penal law. So you could literally go to jail if you destroyed an archive, but right now you can just get fined.
Yeah, it's not a felony
Someone, somehow, sometime
needed
had
something
the
destroyed.
interest to destroy something.
Yeah.
So we need a debate. Okay, but for a prosperous debate, you need people that can understand the terms of the debate, the issues.
Yeah, and that's where I'm skeptical, because I don't think there's that many.
Do you have them?
No, I don't think so.
No. I'm sorry. For example, right now, I think it was the most, let's say, outstanding point in the last years on culture is Mihai Neamțu, who was voted in the Romanian parliament being on the list of our. And right now he's the president of the Culture Commission in the Romanian Lower Chamber, the Chamber of Deputies. He had a strong standing point on the problem with the helmet, but still, in that commission, I don't have people that are actually specialized on culture issues that issued, let's say, a public debate on what should be done with all those kind of issues. We don't have that because people tend to learn, how we say in Romania, by the ear. They're very superficial about it. Okay.
And I honestly can't blame them.
And do you have any think tank on it? For example,
No, and again, I honestly cannot blame them, because this is a highly autistic thing, And you could never see me donate even $1 for that.
I know, just for us.
Because it's so boring.
Okay, for you, excuse me, we're starting talking with private collectors in Romania
Yeah, there are quite a few of those.
And how we should modify our laws. And we were like, okay, do you want something to be modified? Give shekel, and we can talk about it.
Yeah, and are they interested?
They're mostly interested, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Because last time I had this conversation, I have to admit, it was more than 25 years ago. In 1998, I found a book from the 1500s that was sitting quite literally in the water on the bottom of an abandoned basement. And
do you still have the book?
Yes, I do still have the book, of course. I restored it myself because most of the not just the institutions but also the private collectors were just not interested. And there was a thing that at some point I had a problem with the state because they were like, oh, but you found it on what is legally a state property. And I'm like, okay, fine, you can have it, but it has to be under proper conditions of maintaining such an artifact. Do you, the state, have those conditions? Oh, you don't, therefore finders keepers, screw you, right? So I kept it for myself. But the thing is that at the time, private collectors had no interest in doing these kinds of things, of changing the legislation and changing the things. And that's why I'm surprised when you tell me that. Well, I guess 25, 27 years.
Yeah, things change because I know private collectors that have issues with the cultural police. We actually have a branch in the national police that is based on cultural issues. And there were a lot of police.
Here I should probably clarify, cultural police refers to ancient artifacts and things like that. It doesn't refer to movies or whatever. No.
Yeah.
I mean, it can sound pretty bad in English, but it's nowhere near as bad as it sounds.
I don't know how to name it actually properly.
I guess it would be the antique police.
Antique police, rather like that. And there were some misdemeanors, like the police just coming to your house. Oh, nice painting you have here on the wall. We think it's mostly antique, 19th century. We're gonna take it as the state's interest. Wait, this is my grandfather. Screw you. I mean, because most of them weren't actually trained to this kind of stuff. You need at least a history graduate to be in the police. I can only name one in the country. Like everybody is very proud of it here in Romania. His name is Vitalie Ciobanu, and he really managed to resolve some issues. He is from Nantes country. He managed to resolve some issues regarding culture and patrimony. For example, you have churches where, I don't know how, but they installed heaters in inappropriate places.
Oh, yeah.
With disregard for paintings. You had, you have the same issue with people that steal cultural objects. They should be punished. That's for certain. But you need a new policy regarding, for example, people that stroll around the woods with metal detectors. Usually right now, when you discover something, you should give up to your local culture office, let's call it. And you can receive something like a reward, but it isn't a rule about it. And the whole progressive idea, speaking, for example, from the voice of Vlad Alexandrescu, ex-Ministry of Culture from USR, he was very against all these metal detecting associations. And everybody was like, this is not the subject. The subject is the museum in Holland, the theft. Wait a minute. Like, they tried, and people in USR tried to have this kind of discourse. There's some sort of culture against culture against culture, culture against cultural goods. No, it isn't that. Actually, all this metal detecting association actually did made a lot of good to the scientific community in general. For example, they done a lot of collections with antiques that were found on the front line. They documented a lot of stuff. So actually, you should somehow create a legal basis for them to easily collaborate with archaeologists, you should actually, for example, and I have this my idea that we should actually have tax cuts for certain parts of the society. And I know, speaking, for example, from a point of view, like, for example, from Garden Tolak or from Virginia school point of view, we say, okay, but they can become actually free riders afterwards in the market because they won't pay their part of the share. But I have my crazy idea that actually we should try some tax cuts, let's say for a category today, another category tomorrow.
And gradually everyone is
tax-free. That's my point of view, actually, because you cannot just cut taxes all the way. It's a form, we can say it's a form of intervening in economy, but it's rather gradual liberalizing everything than having things like, okay, tax cuts next morning. It won't happen. That's if we don't vote for a Milei.
Yeah, although it is a good idea, politically it's very difficult to achieve. I mean, even Milei has had to struggle quite a bit.
Yeah.
And eventually...
And Argentina, it's much better organized in comparison with Romania. Okay.
These days, yes.
Yeah.
A year ago, that wasn't the case. It's amazing.
Still ex-socialist country.
Yeah, it's amazing how much a year of chainsaw can solve into the state bureaucracy. Maybe we should, especially given that, Afuera is not that far away from Afară Tuvangua. So we could have that, like, the Afară party to be focused on firing useless bureaucrats. And goodness me, we have quite a few of those.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a few of those. I was having a chat with a political operative just before you came to pick me up and start filming this, with a certain city hall in this country, of a middle city, not a big city,
all right,
that has more than 2,000 employees, and
say what?
Considering that there are like 50,000 people in total in that city. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a case for Afuera. Probably 1,500 of those 2,000 can be fired today and nobody would notice. And we were just discussing on how to start making that happen. What do you see as the main problem here? I mean, are you focused or no? Do you even care if you get any recognition? Because sometimes, especially in our circles, we do get some of that. That is to say, we manage to do something amazing, like shut down a certain institution or get some new exception in the arms legislation and basically slowly liberalize weapons regime here. But there's never much recognition, or when there is, the press is horrified. Like every 2 years, the press writes, there are certain special interest groups, we have no idea who they are. But compared to 5 years ago, the weapons regime is more liberal than it was 5 years ago. How did that happen? And I'm like, well, we happened, but we're not getting any recognition. Now, I'm fine with that, but most people are not. So how do you struggle with that?
Well, I think it's more important for us to actually measure recognition than to actually have recognition.
Right.
I'm going to tell you why, because I think it's very important who offers you recognition. And I can give a clear example of it. For example, 3 years ago, the Ministry of Education just cut Easter vacation, judging on the fact that there's this month difference between Catholic and Orthodox Easter, and so that would be no discrimination between Western and Eastern rites. Just cut all vacation at all and give something in the middle between Easters. And no. And we just had a public statement on it, only that, in the beginning. But I think the most important thing being conservative is actually being also civilized. We didn't went firstly speaking like, oh, the Ministry of Education is a wokeist Satanist, all right? We have, statistically speaking, in Romania, 65,000 children that have both their parents abroad. Just imagine those children don't have the possibility to have Easter with their parents. Tears. And this kind of talking point. Or like saying, of course, which actually criticizing the Ministry of Education, but at the middle of the press release of being wokest, and also giving some statements from the National Law of Education at that time, that was better written than the one currently on. All the mainstream media was like, okay, we agree on that subject, okay? But everybody was like in the so-called conservative, nationalist, Christian, sovereignist part of the political spectrum was like, you didn't done well, not okay. Why? You should have taken this idea and give it to us.
Why?
Because we would have won 0.5% in the ballots. Or maybe try something different, or promote a certain political individual. Okay, you would have paid for that idea? No, but we thought that you were just gallant and want to resolve the problem. I did solve the problem. But it isn't morally all right to solve the problem by yourself. Excuse me?
Извините, что?
And people just weren't like very happy because the problem was solved, because they didn't solve it by themselves. They wanted another NGO, a party.
Yeah, but again, who stopped
Who
them?
stopped you? And when you had the time. And I recall calling people in PNLA saying, okay, you want to bring our at 50%? Please bring back Easter's vacation. And we were somehow politically correct. We say, okay, give 1 week for the Orthodox Eastern Rite and the majoritarian nomination in Romania, and give 1 week for the Catholics, Protestants, and so on. No, they just gave 2 weeks for the Orthodox, none for the Catholics. It happened with the majority. Okay, so just give them. We don't want to lose in the face of our. Okay, because our somehow became a boogeyman in politics, and if you wanted at the time, and if you wanted 2 years ago to obtain something conservative from PNL or PSD, you would have said, okay, if you don't give us that, our will start rising up in the polls, and abruptly PSD, the Socialist Democratic Party, and the National Liberal Party starting having some sort of conservative talking points regarding faith, traditional family, conservative values, just by that.
Yeah, but just like that, was what, a year and a half ago, the left-wing prime minister, after the European Court of Human Rights said that we must have gay marriage in Romania, and the leftist comes out and says, we don't give a shit what the European Court of Human Rights has to say. And no, that won't happen.
We don't want to lose elections.
Yeah, we don't want to lose elections. It just won't happen. Goodbye. And 2 years later, it still didn't happen. And it's very unlikely that would happen. Precisely, unlike in Greece, which was very surprising. I mean,
that was surprising.
Yeah, but then again, Greece has a very long tradition in Pidaism, so let's not talk about that. Right.
Speaking about antiquities.
Speaking about antique, yeah, that's true. So you're saying that it does matter who offers you recognition and why.
And why, yeah, that's the whole point, because, for example, we're very, let's say, we think twice when somebody with a special political interest offers us recognition. And I think the greatest recognition that we receive is from the direct beneficiaries of our actions. If we speak, for example, for students, parents, and so on, because they are actually our target audience, all right? We do things for them, not for us. And I think this is actually the breaking point where Liga Studenților started becoming very popular, because most of the student NGOs, and literally most of the NGOs, do things for themselves. They're actually grifting machines for the people that are in charge of them and that have a special interest, maybe just bluff off their curriculum vitae, or
it's either pecuniary or
exactly, or
ideologically.
obtain a political
Clout.
something like that. But whilst all these years we didn't have people in our leadership that went into politics, didn't accept compromise. We even were subjected to pressures from political parties, from the local police, from the secret services. I was, for example, accused of being a Russian agent. Yeah, like everybody's a Russian agent right now in Romania. Lucian is a Russian agent. Okay,
Well, sometimes I speak in Russian, so therefore...
for not bowing to the current thing, because all they just want is control. And beyond that, we extended even to geopolitical stuff. For example, we cut financing for pro-Russian parties in Moldova.
that somehow made you a Russian agent.
Yeah, it's very funny. And the pro-Russian party actually was led by Ilan Shor, that, the Israeli, Moldovan-born corrupt politician who is right now in Moscow.
Yeah, in exile.
In exile, and he actually tried to buy all of Moldova. Well, he tried.
Well,
Almost.
Well, he did get his own billion, so
Yeah,
come on, it
exactly.
worked out just fine.
It worked out. Well, with the help of the local political elite that was generously and without no hesitation or any sort of condition supported by the Romanian government.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, it works. They just want to control the narrative. Okay, we had this party. It was thoroughly pro-Russian, against NATO, against the EU, mostly against Romania. They just mocked for example, the memory of Romanian soldiers in the Second World War that actually liberated Bessarabia from the Soviet rule. And you have that issue in the sovereignist part of the political spectrum. I'm not talking the next video, but it's just intros like most of the sovereignists are anti-EU, anti-NATO, and some sort pro-Russian in some areas or talking points. And for example, most of them are against the current regime in Moldova. Most of them would have wanted for the Russians to come back to power in Moldova. And it's very important how you talk with them, how you extract them from their black and white viewpoint. Okay, and I asked them, okay, do you also agree with the idea that the Shor Party mocks the memory of Romanian soldiers from the Second World War? Oh, so you're not fully pro the Russian parties in Moldova, right? So at that time, the people in PNL just got mad because the PNL wanted to invest in pro-Russian parties in Moldova.
Funny how that goes. Oftentimes PNL happens to fund
Russian things.
Nominally pro-Russian.
Raluca Turcan actually had some 3 years at the Pushkin Institute in Moscow.
Yeah. I mean, she's schooled in Moscow. They've been funding Shorist type of parties in Moldova.
And just because PAS, Maya Sandu's parties in Moldova, had at that time a tendency to go towards USR, and PNL thought, okay, we're going to do that to take PAS back towards us. It was just a stupid idea.
Well, eventually they were going to get PAS anyway if they were not stupid, but they were, so they lost it. But in any event, this time around with the annulment of the election, one of the argument was that, one of the pro-Georgescu campaign was nearly identical to an already known Kremlin-style campaign that had been deployed in Ukraine in 2021, months before the invasion. Well, it turns out that was funded by PNL as well. Not the one in Ukraine, the one here.
Yeah, a disclaimer, I have a terrible flu right now, and only 1% of the coughing in this video is for theatrical reasons. Continue.
Yeah, so no, and it turns out that the Kremlin-style campaign that had been deployed in 2024 in the last week of the election campaign
was financed by PNL.
Well, yeah, was financed also by the National Liberals. So it seems like a recurring pattern here. And if we're going to take seriously about this whole thing of fighting Russian disinformation, then flattening the National Liberals is quite literally in the national interest at this point. Isn't it?
Yeah. Mostly it is because right now PNL has nothing to do with its forerunners, with its historical figures. Right now PNL, it's the great party of the regime, because sometimes PST tends to be rather more against the regime in certain points than PNL. PNL is much more aligned with the regime, maybe mostly because in the last years it also gave the director of the internal
intelligence community,
yeah.
Yeah, could be that. And the president.
And the president, and
the Minister of Internal Affairs.
and it's something very and it's something very interesting because, for example, I started charting a whole network of individuals in PNL that I think are linked with security services from all over Europe, because they don't play for Romania. They play for Germany, they play for France.
I was about to say BND
They
has
play
so many
for
friends.
whoever pays, but not for Romania. And mostly I can see that through the, let's say, testing paper that is Moldova. Because in Moldova you have special German interest, special French interest that do not align anyhow with Romanian interests.
Of course.
Because Romania having more influence in Moldova, meaning actually Romania having more influence in the EU, and the Brussels elites wouldn't want that, wouldn't they?
Yeah,
right?
That would be bothersome,
Yeah.
as we would say.
So as Lech Wałęsa actually told at an event in 2014, he was at an anniversary event at the Romanian Parliament, at the anniversary of the fall of the Iron Curtain to 25 years. I was allotted to a panel where he spoke with us, and I had 2 questions at that time. Hopefully I can find the recording. It would be gold. What does he think about the reunion with Moldova? He'd actually give us chances of having Moldova reunified with Romania than Ukraine being in the EU, because Moldova is much smaller and it isn't, from a natural resource point of view, as much as, let's say, offering and interesting for France or Germany, which are the main actors of the European Union. But he was thoroughly an agent of the idea that, and I do believe him, that mostly France would be against Ukraine's admission to the EU, because at that time the French agriculture would be just dead.
Yeah.
And I do agree with him.
Yeah.
It's just facts.
Not a big fan of Lech Wałęsa myself, because he's not particularly smart. But then again, that was not difficult to figure it out.
Exactly.
The CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy,
in
was French-centered.
Moldova, you just have to see what politician from Bucharest strolls around and what are his local interests and what part of the rope is he pulling. So, in the last years, I saw the Americans aligning towards the Romanian point of view, or I'm not actually sure if Bucharest aligned towards Washington, because some way, somehow, and mostly I think through the whole efforts of some Romanian academics and ex-Moldovan pro-Romanian politicians like Igor Munteanu or academics like Dan Dungaciu, they started this whole security talk. Because after the war broke loose in Ukraine, people started asking questions about Moldova, seeing all those maps shown stupidly on television by Lukashenko. All right, okay, what's going to happen with Transnistria? And I was at a security conference in October 2022 in Chisinau, and I raised that issue. If you ask a Moldovan citizen if he would fight for defending Moldova against a Russian attack, his answer will depend on his ethnic identity. If he identifies as being ethnic Moldovan, being Moldovan is just a creation in the Bolshevik laboratories that Moldovans are different people with a different language, he would say, no, I'm going to Italy.
Yeah, pretty much.
Mă duc la Italia.
Yep, pretty much.
Ca așa, ca tiac, așa se primești. If you would ask a Moldovan national, that would say, okay, I'm Romanian, okay, fuck the Russians. I will die for my country. Just as the heroes done that in 92 when policemen, young people with some of them no military experience fought the Russian army at the Dniester River, stalemating the Russian defense in Moldova. All right? We had that experiment 30 years ago. We saw that. We actually had that wasn't also just a theory or just a Russo-Moldovan war. It was actually a war against the Romanian people because Russia's invasion from Transnistria towards Moldova had the only scope to deter Moldova's unification with Romania.
Which was openly admitted.
You have politicians in Bucharest saying that Romania shouldn't be that powerful at Chișinău because we can upset Paris and Berlin. Well, I don't care.
Well, I don't care.
Yeah?
Yeah, but it's funny that now J.D. Vance is doing the rounds in the media by just basically going to every single left-wing Karen in all of these fancy studios and effectively going with the I don't care. When I started this channel, the motto was, and still is to this day, I proudly belong to the I don't give a flying fuck school of thought. So it's great that 10 years later now we have an ally in Washington that basically says, I don't care.
Just imagine a century after our talk, Liga Studenților offering the honorary Lucian Vâlsan scholarship for not giving a fuck.
For not giving a fuck.
With laurels.
Yeah, we're just running out of fucks to give. But no, seriously, I mean, at some point, I don't care should be in itself not a political ideology, but a political position in and of itself.
Well, and I understand geopolitical talks. We're going to talk about why, the whole scandal with Georgescu, latest talking about Ukraine, just created the whole scandal.
I saw that too. Okay,
we're going to talk about it.
But that's election campaign talk.
Okay, exactly. But the whole issue in politics is that you need only one thing: balls.
Yeah.
Okay, you have balls, you have cojones. You're right. Okay.
Generally speaking, testosterone and high energy tends to carry pretty much everything. I mean, ultimately, Traian Băsescu was not significantly more powerful than these guys, but he had testosterone and high energy, and it turns out that was just enough. Yeah. And I was reviewing recently a press conference from 2014 when he was in his last year of his last term. Nobody cared at that point anymore that much because everyone was expecting the new elections. And Lukoil decided to shut down a refinery to pressure the prosecutor's office to get off their backs. And, he just came up with a one per press conference and said, well, if they want Moscow style of laws, well, there is a train that's running all the way to Moscow. They should fuck off and get on that train and fuck off. If not, open the refinery or we'll come and open it for you and you're gonna fuck off anyway. Guess what? The same day the whole controversy was ended. Did he really have the strength to enforce that? Maybe, but it would have taken more than one day.
Well, the same thing.
But testosterone and high energy solved the crisis.
The same thing with Putin, all right? For example, one key issue is talking about culture and culture goods and stuff like that. We have a lot of gold treasures that are stored right now in the Hermitage basement in St. Petersburg, part of our national treasury that was stored during the First World War in Tsarist Russia at that time because of the link between our royal house and the Romanovs. And it was lost because of Lenin's revolution. We got something back from the Soviets, but it's just a symbolic part. Okay, everybody is talking about tezaurul de aur, okay? So basically the gold treasure that Romania has in the hands of the Russians, okay? We want that back. Let's negotiate. No. Okay, let's nationalize Lukoil. And we have a new talking point. Does anybody has the balls to do that kind of talking in Romanian politics? No. Because it's like you're going up to a doctor's cabinet. You know, there's this kind of vertical rulers where children are usually measured. And you have, this is the height for Romanian politicians. This is the height for being German. This is the height for being Luxembourgese, and so on. Okay? If your name is Gilles Hofstadt, you can say more on a subject. If your name is something with SQ in your ending and you're coming from Bucharest, just shut the fuck up. In the whole face of the European elite that wants you to shut the fuck up. Because if you don't keep your mouth shut, we could start actually doing stuff against your country. And yeah, I sometimes do actually understand Romanian politicians when they say, okay, we shouldn't or we can do that because, you know, Germany can blackmail us in point A or in point I. And I'm like, all right, and what does the external secret service do? Because, you know...
Also, in some cases, that's actually worth it anyway, even if it were true.
Yeah, but Ciolacu had some balls, actually.
Yes.
When he went to Ursula and negotiated the elimination of the mechanism for cooperation and verification in justice, or the MCV, how we spell it in Romanian. And yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that one was a result of, okay, do you want us to start talking about Pfizer-gate? Because that's how it basically worked. Oh, you want us to shut up about Pfizer-gate? Fine, you shut up about the MCV thing, like entirely forever.
And it happened.
And it happened. It's like it took 24 hours.
That's how you negotiate. I cannot understand the external secret service CIA doesn't have anything about European politician. Don't we have files about the issues in their respective states?
Let me tell you something.
Don't we have info or leverage on them?
Now, let me tell you something, especially explain to our foreign friends here. I mean, we've all seen the external intelligence services report on the election, which is worse written than my 12-year-old niece's creative writing composition, significantly worse. That's one aspect. Second aspect, even if there is some leverage, it's always poorly used. And third, the European Union overall, the whole all 27 member states at this point, they spend about 4 billion euros per year for intelligence services, out of which 1.1 billion is spent in Romania. We spend a lot on this huge bureaucracy that just doesn't deliver. And why? Because they are primarily focused on controlling the internal situation, thus neglecting entirely some of the foreign policy aspects where they could be useful. Because I'm not saying that they should be abolished, but I am saying that they should do their goddamn jobs.
Yeah, and it's just stupid because it's just as if we are hiring some super nannies, very pricey super nannies, to take care of us and assure us that we don't damage our own national security.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's dumb.
All right. We're going to get into the national security.
Defensory.
Off we are, everyone, and then we start hiring back based on
When did they planted those marks, actually? I mean...
Have you tried this one? Right. We're going to talk about conspiracies.
Oh, it's on YouTube.
With national security and all of that in the next video. Is there anything that we have forgotten to discuss about this whole hula baloo activism, judicial activism, Coțofenești Helmet? Is there anything that we have forgotten? Because I'm going to wrap this up.
Yeah, I can recall something about Queen Antonescu. Yeah, we do have something personal with him. I can actually say something on that because he was the author of a stupid law in Romania that actually created a lot of problems to ex-political detainees, and he was the guy they wanted them to be condemned a second time for not being democratic in their ways of going against communism. So fuck you, like, I'm gonna have to fight communism with what? With ballots when they just put up the army and they confiscated whole stashes of ballots being thrown out for the Liberals, for the Peasant Party in 1946. What should have people shut down in communism? Like, Crin Antonescu actually at that time just wanted to create a grift for some of his followers in PNL. There's right now this whole grift in Romania regarding anti-Semitism. They see anti-Semitism in where it is somehow, there are some places where we do have actually proper anti-Semitism, but they sometimes do invent a lot of anti-Semitism just for grifts.
Yeah, to justify the perpetration
of certain NGOs, certain public institutions. You have an anti-communist fighter. Oh, he was in the legionary movement, in the Iron Guard, whilst he was 12 years old. Oh, he certainly killed Jews. Just as a presumption of something stupid like that. Just meaning that, okay, how many Jews were actually killed by the Iron Guard? Very hard to prove historically and give a certain amount of people, okay? Everything that happened in the 40s is still debatable and open for history. And I think after 20 years, we can actually, when a century after the events would just fold up, I think we can speak about everything
with much less emotion.
Sure. And these institutions that fight anti-Semitism don't fight, I don't know what happened, don't fight against Palestinian anti-Semitism.
Oh, of course not.
Okay? They're 100% pro-Hamas.
That's a very good segue into the next video.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of hula-baloo about that. All right. So with that said, thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys tomorrow, or in our case, an hour from now, because we're taking a break. See you guys tomorrow, and we're going to talk about the sovereignists, and hopefully we won't forget to also cover the sovereignists all over Europe.
Yeah.
Because that gets even more complicated. All right. Thank you all for watching. See you soon. Cheers.